Please, the show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Yo, welcome to the Blue Lounge. Welcome to the channel. Apologies for the delay, but AFCON takes precedence on this. What a fantastic final! What a fantastic match! And had it gone into penalties, we'd have been even delayed further. But yeah, I want to say congratulations to Senegal on a great victory, considering the drama that we saw in that game. It was a very, very enjoyable game to watch. And hard luck to Morocco. It wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant to be. But yeah, we are not here to talk about AFCON. We're here to talk about Chelsea. But I thought I'll drop that plug in for a great tournament and a great final. As you guys can probably see, I've got someone new on the screen today. It's Bobby Fairview. A lot of you would know him from the comments. A lot of you would know him from X. Bobby, welcome to the show. Great to have you on, my friend.
Thank you, Mo. And big up to the chat, big up to my fellow panelists. I mean, I think I've been hanging around in your chat now for probably 2 years, Mo. I'm not one of the
it's been a while.
original gangsters, but actually, no, we were here from the Roman days.
Yeah. I think you go back to pre 10,000 subscribers. I think you were here when I was in the
Right.
5,000 subscriber region. Now you're an OG. I classify you as an OG. I classify you as an OG. Welcome, Bobby. It's great to have you on the
Appreciate it.
show. Bobby is here tonight to give us his insight to the Chelsea finances. A lot of you that know Bobby would have read a lot of his comments, a lot of his debates in regards to finances. I've had my fair share of discussions with him on X in the past, so it's good to have him on the show, and hopefully we will learn a few things from him. We have a returning panelist, one of the OGs. I think me and Max we started YouTube. I think I was on like 300-400 subscribers when I met you, Max. So you are one of the old school lot. Big up to you, Max. Welcome to the show. How you doing, my brother?
Big up, Mo. Big up to the rest of the panel. Nice to be on, but nice to be on the show again. Yeah, I'm all good. Thank you very much. Had a good day. The only spoiler was my son's football team, Sunday team, lost their 100% record today. After being 2-0 up, it was 2-2. They didn't lose, but still. But yeah, it's good. It's all good.
Big up, Max, and welcome back. And before I say welcome to Nee, I just want to say, I hope Kai gets well soon. He was playing football and had an injury. He broke his leg. So Kai, I hope you get well soon. And big up to you. And just stay safe, brother. Stay safe. And being a Chelsea fan, injuries is a thing that we do, isn't it? So it's a Chelsea thing. So big up to Kai. Nee Zion, welcome back. One of the OGs. How are you?
Doing all right, doing well. It's just another day, Sunday, another week begins again, and I'm happy to be here and hear what Bobby has to share with us. So,
thank you. Welcome back, Kenny.
And
one
more to say, happy to be
go
on the
ahead.
stream with, happy to see Matt's face again, and legendary himself, Max. I'm done. Max, big up to you, Max.
I do have a negative comment to make about Max though. I don't like the color of his shirt.
I know. I don't know why I chose red today when I came on the show. Yeah, last week I think I had a Chelsea shirt on, but yeah.
No, it's all good. I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
And last
color.
And last but not least, we have a returning guest, a returning panelist from the Stanford Sink. Matt, how are you, brother? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right, man. Good to be back. It's been a little while. Big up the panel, big up the chat. Great. This will be the first time I've streamed with Mac, so looking forward and to talking to you. And Bobby Fairview on the panel, man. Absolutely love that. Bobby's been, since I've been doing these with you, Bobby's been in it since the beginning, man. So it's great to be able to have a chat with him. And obviously, thanks for having us on.
Big up to you.
Big up, big up, big up. Um, Bobby, I will. I saw your message. I will try. I need to adjust the screen, but I will try to share it. Let me just see if I can bring it up. I should be able to. I should be able to. All right. So, people, big up to you. I see you, Luke, Courtney, Jackie, Gabrielle, Max in the chat as well. Everyone in the chat, thank you for your comments. Thank you for your likes. And for those of you who haven't hit the like button, please do so. And let's get these likes up as quickly as possible. So, we all know what has been going on over the past couple of days. I posted a ton of content on it. Apparently, Chelsea are in the market for a very young French centre back, and he is being priced at around 65 million euros by his club. And this is Jeremy Jacquet, as I've been told is pronounced, Jeremy Jacquet. So he is a 20-year-old centre back who has not had a lot of, first team football. I think this is his breakout season this season. He's played in the youth setup. He's played for the French youth team as well. He is a player that Liam Mousinho likes. He thinks highly of him. Again, Liam Mousinho spent the last 18 months in France, so he knows the players in that league better than you and I. But for Chelsea to go into the transfer market on a player that is priced at 65 million euros, knowing that Chelsea are also looking to go into the market again in the summer for potentially a midfielder, potentially another attacker, where do we stand in regards to our finances? How are we doing financially? And I wanted to bring on today Bobby Fairview, as he is knowledgeable in regards to the finances and probably can give us an insight. So, Bobby, transfer market, the doubling of Chelsea in the winter and potentially in the summer. Where do we stand in regards to financial fair play, PSR? Uh, what's our finances looking like?
Sure. So we want to make this discussion as clear as possible to as many people as we can. There's a lot of complexity, not necessarily because of the numbers themselves, but because of the way the Blue Coal Group is structured. So, in order to get your head around this, you might think back to the financial statements that were published last year. And so you're going to try to reconcile what I'm about to say to what you were seeing on X, for example, where Chelsea apparently made a lovely profit. Um, and then, as Twitter users, as we chatted in our communities together, we realized, well, hold on a second. A lot of that really was from the sale of the women's team from Blue Coal to Blue Coal. So how do you create a profit by selling something to yourself? So PSR, as a regulation, if you like, is not really doing what it is supposed to do in terms of giving you confidence that when you get financial reporting from your club, it actually represents a fair profit, right? So that when you cut through the noise, where Chelsea is starting every year is about $200 million in loss. So, in other words, as soon as the financial year opens, which is July 1st, which is around the time of the transfer window, you can estimate that the club will bleed at least $200 million for that year. And where does that $200 million come from? I don't know if you're able to put that up on screen, Mo.
Yep.
Yeah, so this was an exhibit that was published by um, The Athletic. This was sometime after the financial statements last year. And as I said, we got this sense that Chelsea was in a profitable position, but then there was debate as to whether or not that was the truth. So what the Athletic did was to disaggregate their financial statements to try to isolate, well, what are our true expenses that we need to incur to operate? In other words, what are the things that we're paying cash for? And then where are we getting cash receipts in? Right? So just pure income statement, cash in, cash out. And what you can see there is a development of losses going into the COVID period, which was kind of expected. The club was not generating the kind of gate receipts, etc., because of the lockdowns. So Roman ate a lot of losses during those years. But then you have Blueco taking over, significantly increasing those expenses even more and operating at around 200 million of losses each year. So whenever you think about the transfer window, think about the fact that they have to first fund 200 millions out of the gate. What that doesn't include is the interest on the debt. And we can get into that in more detail. What debt does Chelsea really have versus, the fact that we keep hearing that Blueco never really took debt out on the club? Well, that's because of the holding company structure. So whenever you hear financial statements being reported, you have to be careful. Is it the holding company or is it Chelsea? So let me pause there. I've said quite a bit. So the starting point for this year is 200 million negative. And then the question is, how does the club then generate income to fund transfers? And I guess the point that I'm making here is I think that we are a sell to buy club, not because of the UEFA sanctions, but because of that hole that we're in every year.
Mm, interesting. Interesting. So this wasn't the case under Roman. Judging by the charts, we were quite liquid up until COVID. Would that be fair to say?
I think what I think is fair to say, what people don't understand is that Roman actually made a profit on the sale of Chelsea.
Mm,
People don't really talk about the genius of the way he structured his investment in Chelsea, even given what happened at the end. Um, Roman paid about 60 million for Chelsea way back in what was it, 2002? Held it for 19 years, and he ended up making something like a 3.5% return on his investment. And that investment included uh, writing off the debt that had accumulated over the years. So I think that debt stood at something like 1.7 million he had accumulated in 19 years. Blueco has actually accumulated 1.1 billion in losses in 3 years. And that's just purely from an accounting perspective. That includes the
So,
amortization of
Bobby,
players, etc.
let
Yep,
me let me interrupt you for a second.
sure.
So, what you've just said there is contradictory to what we've been led to believe in regards to the way these guys are operating. Because the premise of their model, the premise of their system is this is a financially successful way of doing things. It might not be a sporting success driven model, but it's a financial success driven model. But the figures that you've just showed us indicates that this isn't the case. We are actually not making a financial gain. Or are we making a financial gain in a different manner in regards to the improvement or the increase of the assets? Because I'm trying to figure out how are these guys actually looking at this to be a positive financial investment. So can you just explain that to me? Because I'm a little bit lost here. Because this is what we've been fed. We've been fed that this is a financially successful model, but it isn't. Correct?
Well, that is yet to be seen. So let's not prejudge it. I mean, I think it's highly
Okay.
unlikely. It's highly unlikely, and I'll tell you why I think so in a minute. But
Mm,
I guess your question to me initially was funds available for transfers, right? But I
mm,
think I think your question really is prompting us to take an even further step back. What exactly is the play? Why did they buy Chelsea? What's the story we've been hearing? And then how are the numbers actually playing out over the last 4 years? right? So the story of Bouquet, as I've been able to figure it out myself, is that Bowley decided back in, I understand he was trying to get the club since 2019, but that's just a rumor, of course. But we know for sure in 2022 he had $300 million and certainly could not afford the club with that. So he got two of his buddies to, that's Weiss and Walter, to join him with 300 million each, but that was still not sufficient. Roman was heading towards a bid of 2.5 billion, and he was requiring the buyers to invest a further 1.7 billion. Now, this is really important information, right? We would have heard this. The news reporting was not particularly accurate. Obviously, a lot of this was under confidentiality and contractual agreements. But when you think back to that period of time, you heard things like Blue Coat needs to be here for 10 years. Well, where did you actually ever see that being reported? All right. That 10 years simply comes from the fact that PE investors stay in for 10 years. That's it. Right. There's no requirement that Roman can actually enforce on anybody to stay in for 10 years. Roman can't even enter the UK. So it's always an absurd story about them staying for 10 years. They're staying for 10 years because that's what they promised to their investors, right? So what you had was 2.5 billion, being 900 million of which came from Bowley and his two buddies. The rest came from Clear Lake. Now, what we saw in the first year was Clear Lake making a move on Bowley and taking control of the club, right? So Bowley was doing as he pleased for the first couple of months. He was spending a lot of money. They were not happy with the results, and we saw Clear Lake then taking over. And we need to understand that Egbali is an asset manager. He's not a fan of football. He never woke up one morning and said he wanted to own a football club. He just knew that there was a man named Todd Bowley who couldn't afford to buy Chelsea, and he needed 1.6 billion. So that was the original purchase price, if you like, um, um, between those guys trying to pay the 2.5 billion to Roman. Now Roman was clever. That 2.5 billion gave him a 4% return despite the losses that he made during COVID. So that big loan that he wrote off included all those COVID losses, but he still managed to make a profit. These guys took over, and with the losses that they're running, they're currently between 4 and 6% down in terms of a return to their investors. They borrowed money at north of 10%, right? So institutional investors that invested in Clear Lake are expecting a return on that investment. Okay, they're not here for the love of football, right? So these guys have been running at a negative ROI for the uh, first two years, 3 years. We know for sure from the audited financial statements, and so they keep trying to give this story that they're improving the way they're running the club. The problem is that whenever you see these players being sold, they're typically being sold at a loss. And it's as straightforward as looking at what did we pay for Nkuku and what did we sell him for, right? We made a profit on Mudrick, right? But there are very few that we actually made a profit on. So in terms of actual cash bleed, they've been in a negative position since they've started. And what they're trying to do is to replicate the Brighton model, just to bring this home to your question. Now, what is the most profitable club in the EPL? Possibly Brighton, but this year they made a loss, right? So the question is, what kind of model are they actually pursuing that can get them from negative 4% to catch back up to the 10% that they've promised their investors? I've said a lot again, and I see that you guys are deep in thought. Max, you got a question?
On Modric. Not Modric. We couldn't have made a profit on Modric.
I think you mean Madueke.
Oh, did I say
Madueke.
Mudrick? Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah.
I did have Mudrick in my mind because he's a complete write-off.
Yeah, I think.
Madueke.
I think
My
it's Madueke,
question,
correct?
I think, yeah. I think I've asked you this question before, Bobby, on X, and probably for the people listening in as well. So obviously we had the Rain Group who were overseeing the takeover bid, and people say that Roman Abramovich was involved. I don't believe he was in the decision making personally, but what made the Rain Group think it was a good idea to sell to a partnership which involved a equity fund? Because surely we know what a private equity fund is about. It's about taking a company as making as much money as you can and trying to then get a profit at the end of it. So it's more financial than success on the playing field. So what made them think it was a good idea to have them
Well,
as custodians of the club?
sure. I think it came down to price.
Mm.
At the end of the day, Rain Group had a mandate to get the best price for the club. And that was aligned with Roman's interests, arguably in line with the UK. Um, when you get to investments of that size, 2.5 billion, requiring another 1.7 billion, that's way beyond the capability of an individual. So you're typically looking at a sovereign wealth fund, Saudi, a PIF, or the modern way to finance things is to go to a private equity firm and borrow the money. So private lending, as they call it, is probably as big as bank lending these days, right? Private equity firms are lending for almost anything. Um, so Boley didn't have money, but the private equity firm was willing to do that, and they were willing to meet Roman's demand of 2.5 billion plus investment in the club. So I think it really just came down to who had the most money.
Mm. This Saudi media group then did they not have the funds? Or
I mean, in
I
hindsight, I
know.
think the issue was the fact that you would have two clubs being owned by the same fund, right?
Newcastle, Chelsea.
Mm,
Correct. So that would have been problematic because everything in Saudi Arabia, and Mo, you can correct me here. I think everything is basically owned by the kingdom, correct?
Pretty much under different umbrella groups, but yeah, pretty much.
Right. It all leads back to the kingdom. So I think the Saudi media group would have been an issue there, from fair competition perspective. But Max, you also raise a good point, right? A lot of people call Clear Lake a hedge fund, a mutual fund. You correctly said it is a private equity group, right? And what they do, Iqbali doesn't actually ever use his own money. He is able to collect money from others. There's been reporting that at the time of the purchase, they were able to get commitments of 14 billion. But the problem that I have with that is that the 14 billion then would have been disclosed in the 2023 financial statements. What was actually disclosed as commitments was only 1.7 billion. And at this point in time, Clear Lake has, we know that they've actually, let me take a step back, gentlemen, because this is a really important point, right? They funded the initial 2.5 billion that went to Roman out of money from Clear Lake, and as I said, 900 from the three partners. Roman required a further 1.7 billion to be invested in the club. And Max, to your point, what he did, Roman's perspective was, look, I can't control what these people do after I leave. Well, let me make sure that they fund the club properly. So he made the purchase price contingent on that 1.7 billion being invested in the club. Here's the problem: these guys didn't take this out of their own pockets. They went to a company called Ares Management, and they borrowed 500 billion. So sorry, 500 million approximately, and then they used that as equity to borrow a further 755 million in bank loans. So, in other words, the 1.7 billion that Roman required them to put into the club, 1.2 billion of it was borrowed money from banks and Ares Management. They did not pull their pockets to do it themselves. And Mo, last time you were on, you were talking about debt to the debt that the club has. That debt doesn't sit on the balance sheet of Chelsea itself, but they have created a series of holding companies above Chelsea because PSR doesn't look past two holding companies above. So they hide the debt in a holding company that's like 3 or 4 layers up, right? Borrowed it, pretended it was their money, and invested it in the club. So it's all borrowed money. Average interest rate is 10% per annum. And as I said, they're losing at about 4 or 5% right now. So they got a big delta to plug.
Is Chelsea Football Club being leveraged for those debts, or is it not?
Every asset in Chelsea is encumbered by that debt. So, in other words, to the extent that Blue Code defaults, and I don't know if you do. Do you have that diagram that I sent you, Mo, last time? I don't know if you could put up on screen because that might be able to help folks really picture what I'm talking about.
I'm just looking.
Is
Is it? Yeah, I have it. I have it. Hold on.
Yep, just put it up on screen because that would help folks to really picture what I'm talking about.
Yep. Give me 2 seconds.
So there's a guy by the name of Greg Cordell, Greg P. Cordell, at Greg P. Cordell. He publishes a lot of information on club finances. So if you go on his Twitter, you search Chelsea, you'll be able to see this debt structure. And what this is trying to show. Sorry, I'm just going to pull this away. What this is trying to show, as you can see, Chelsea FC Holdings Limited is quite down in the bottom near the middle. Are you seeing where it is, Mo? Chelsea FC Holdings is near at the bottom. Chelsea Football Club in blue in the bottom. There we go. But where they're borrowing the money is right up at the top, 22 Holdco Limited. You see how many holding companies there are in between Chelsea and that Holdco? I don't know if folks in the chat are able to see it clearly. But what we're trying to show there is yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, in this chat, are you guys able to see it? Do you want me to make it bigger? Because I could make it slightly bigger. Tell me if you can see it, okay, guys. I mean, this is as big as I can make it without losing any of the table.
It looks blurry on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll just run through it quickly if folks can't see. I'll try to be as detailed as possible. So Chelsea Football Club is at the bottom in blue. And then you see Chelsea FC Holdings. Okay. So whenever there's PSR, they're just looking at the accounts of those two companies. So you have to be really careful when you see, the likes of Matt Law and these guys talking about Chelsea's accounts. Make sure you understand which entity they're talking about. So Chelsea FC Holdings and Chelsea Football Club Limited, those two are in scope for PSR. If you follow the chain up, you'll see Blueco 22 Midco Limited. That is a holding company in the middle there. And then you have Blueco 22 Limited further up above. That is where the bank debt was borrowed. So they borrowed 755 million of bank debt in that entity, secured by all of the assets in the companies below it. Okay. So to the extent that there's a foreclosure, the bank has the right to sell Chelsea Football Club as an asset. What is happening above Blueco 22 Limited is another holding company called 22 Holdco Limited. That is where they borrowed the 527 million from Ares Management, another private equity firm. Okay, so those are the two pieces of institutional debt that total up to about 1.2 billion of the 1.7 billion that Roman has required them to invest in the club. Any questions on that debt structure, guys?
So what's the worst that can happen? Supposing that we can't fulfill the debts or pay back, what will then happen?
I like how you think, Max. You just cut straight to the issue. I actually think that it would be a great outcome. And I have actually posted a thread on my Twitter explaining my perspective on this. Um, and that is, by the way, why my face is hidden, because this is quite a controversial point of view, that I believe that the only way out of this is for Blue Coal 22 Limited to go bankrupt. And that's a pretty controversial thought. But the reason why I say that is PSR.
Bobby,
Sorry, you want?
I'm gonna interject for a second here.
Sure,
I'm
sure,
gonna
sure.
interject for a second. So in regards to going bankrupt,
Yeah.
now we so I'm going to ask this question as a regular Joe, a Chelsea fan who doesn't know too much about finances.
Mhm.
Is any of the action that has been recommended going to have any impact on Blue Coat? So, for example, boycotting. For example, the mega store not buying the products, not going to the matches. Is it going to have an impact? Is it going to have an impact on the investors seeing this happening, or is it just a waste of time, financially speaking?
So this structure is so tightly wung in debt that the only thing the owners are currently putting in is enough cash to pay the interest on that debt. So the only cash contributions that were made in 2025 was sufficient to pay the interest on the debt at the Blue Coal 22 Limited. Okay. So that if you slightly mess with their income, you would cause these losses to continue. The question is, how much longer can they continue sustaining losses? That I really don't know. And it's not necessarily the accounting losses, but more actual cash shortages. So the way they've been managing cash, for example, is by not paying the transfer fees. So right now, Chelsea has record unpaid transfer fees of about half a billion in the 2024 audited financial statements. That's a way of preserving cash, right? Sell players, collect the cash from transfers out, buy players, and not pay the selling clubs, right? So they've been very clever, probably generated about quarter billion of just cash flow that way.
So when just to clarify, when you say they're not paying the transfer fees, are you talking about when they are going to be breaking it down into installments and trying to potentially sell the player before they have to pay the price that they actually bought the player for? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so Roma used to buy players for cash. These guys buy them all credit. And there's obviously the club who's going to sell it to you obviously wants an interest rate, right? So like Crystal Palace, they borrow money at 20% interest sometimes, which means that if they're going to lend Chelsea money by not receiving cash for a player, it's going to be a fairly high interest rate.
So in essence, they are relying on that purchase to increase in value in order for them to be able to repay what they paid and generate the profit. Correct?
I don't think they're being that aggressive. I mean that's something you would do in the financial markets. I mean, I don't
Mhm.
think they're hoping to sell the flip player before they pay back the unpaid transfer fees. I don't, the market is not that the transfer market is not that sophisticated that they can rely on
Okay.
that. I mean, I think other clubs must start to be getting concerned about Chelsea. The investors certainly should be as well, because right now they're not close to being cash flow break even, right? And the accounting losses are just horrific.
Is that why in the past we've gone for these 8-year, 9-year contracts so we can atomize it over a period of time?
Yeah, so that the blue coal reign went through two periods, right? The first period was PSR compliance. So that was the big thing, pure profit was the discussion. You realize there's no discussion about pure profit anymore, right? So before, having a long contract, to your point, what that meant was that you can expense that player over 9 years, not over five. So if a player costs $90 million, you can put an expense of $10 million a year for the 9 years of his contract, right? Before they made that rule change to shorten the amortization to 5 years. So that was a way they were doing of managing their accounting profit. But at the end of the day, they still paid £90 million for the player. So $90 million, £90 million did leave their bank account in theory, as if they were paying it on time. But let's assume they were paying for players cash. £90 million has left the bank account. So they then went into a period after selling the women's team of actually being in my judgment, in cash flow problems. And those cash flow problems have arisen because they've borrowed as much as they can from Aries, and they've used up the entire of the 750 million bank loan. So they basically have, it's almost like they've maxed out their credit cards. The two credit lines are at the maximum limit.
Bobby, can you see this comment, and is it accurate in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the. I mean, I'm not sure what Mazda is really getting at here. So the homegrown pure profit discussion is more of a PSR thing, and after they sold the women's team, they made that fake profit, which satisfied PSR for at least 3 years.
Okay.
Max, I think you have a question there, so I saw you look up.
No. I was just saying, yeah. Not only the women's team, it was also wasn't the car park and some other assets as well.
And the hotels, exactly.
Hotel.
Exactly.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I actually have a little bit of input on the youth thing, something I was looking up today. So the selling the youth players isn't going to help us buy players right now. So it might affect the going into the club's coffers and stuff. But in terms of like players coming in and out of the club, the issues with UEFA are about the cost, the annual cost of what we're paying every single year in amortized transfer fees and wages, and selling youth players gets cash and helps with liquidity. But for instance, if we sell a Tyreek George for 30 mil, that doesn't help like us reduce our cost ratio because there's no amortized fee to go because he's an academy player, and also his wages will be tiny. So where we are in terms of buying players right now, if we're going to, like, for instance, losing Raheem Sterling is actually going to help us get players much more than selling Tyreek George's. Because, like I say, it's the sanctions that we've got and the agreement that we made with UEFA to get out of it is all about the annual squad cost. So, yeah, selling academy players isn't even necessarily that useful for Chelsea at the moment in terms of trying to improve their squad.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you think the priority is right now. I think the UEFA sanctions are actually quite convenient because they allow Blue Cross to not reveal the fact that they've maxed out their credit cards. And, had it not been for the UEFA sanctions, they still would have been in a position where they had to sell to buy. Selling those youth team players because they're not registered for UEFA doesn't help them with the sanctions, to your point. But I do think that they are. My estimate is that they started the year about 65 to 70 million in a hole. And that was actually better than it should have been because they got the money from the Club World Cup, right? So they actually started the year a lot better off than they were probably expecting. So I think the sanctions are, yes, it means they do have to sell UEFA registered players in order to buy UEFA registered players. But for me, I think the real issue is generating cash.
I don't think it's about
Someone
the
just made a
registration of the
good point.
players. I think
sorry.
it's sorry. I just think it's a lot. So I've just been looking into it today. Obviously, it's going to be different next year with the Premier League and stuff. But the UEFA sanctions are because we spent more than the 70% squad cost ratio that we were allowed, and the agreement was, regardless, I think, of whether they're UEFA registered players or not, we can't go over that amount again, and it needs to be brought down before it can go back up. So I think there's normally like a buffer essentially, but we've got like no buffer, and in order to register players have got to be sold. I think that's sort of what I've been trying to figure out from today.
I mean, I think Jackson is the classic example of it, right?
Yeah.
The problem is that Jackson is not registered to Chelsea this year.
Mhm.
So even if he were to be sold, he's not going to create room in the sanctions because he's not a registered Chelsea player.
Yeah.
So if you remember that case, so that was one that they were reporting quite a bit on recently. Jackson's actually no, we're not going to help with the UEFA sanctions. He's definitely going to be good for cash flows.
Yeah.
Bobby, I want you to answer these questions. 60 seconds each. Don't go into too much detail, but I want you to
Sure,
answer
I'll try.
some of these questions. So I've been highlighting some questions that I wanna bring up. Let me just bring it up on my screen. Okay, so can you confirm? It says, if I remember correctly, the Rain Group had some business dealings with the current owners in the past. Is that correct? Like,
I wouldn't be able to verify that one way or the other, but I wouldn't be worried about it if they did. These guys have a particular role in the market, Rain Group. They structure transactions. So it would not be surprising if they structured something that Clearlake or Boley invested in before. But to even make you more comfortable, I actually think that Rain Group made Boley overpay for Chelsea. I don't think that it was
okay,
worth. I don't think it was worth 4.2 billion. If you think about the fact that Spurs is trying, they're trying to get 4.5 billion for Spurs, a club in London with a brand new stadium, generating cash, right? If why would Chelsea without a stadium be worth 4.2 billion 3 years ago? So I actually think these guys got hosed.
okay. Question here from Omar. Um, is Champions League qualification key for financial success?
Absolutely. And look, that represents about 60 million pounds a year in revenue. What continues to really perplex me, guys, is the front of shirt sponsor. Like I don't get it. These guys have given up 100 million pounds of sponsorship in the last 2 years, alienated the fan base by flogging, common players to generate pure profits when it could have just gone 100 million of front of shirt sponsor. It just doesn't make. It's just not logical.
I heard
Okay,
some PR nonsense
Max,
about
let me
that, and
let me
they
let,
said
let me
that.
just get
Oh, go on. Yeah.
through these, and then we'll discuss them all together. So the second question I was gonna, or the third question I was gonna get is Jackie's, but Bobby addressed it already. The last one I have highlighted is here from Courtney. Um, can these guys sell the club? Can they actually sell the club, or does it have to? I know you touched on this, but can they actually physically sell the club if they wanted to by the end of the season?
Look, if you think about the fact that they've already dumped 3.7 billion, sorry, 3 point about 4 billion into the club already. Um, and it is right now, as I said, with Spurs for sale for 4.5 billion and not being sold. I'm not sure who's buying it. Right? There aren't many individuals. It would have to be an individual because there's no institutional investor being run by a prudent board who's going to put 4 billion pounds into an investment that's making negative 5% per year. It just isn't going to happen, right? So the question is, who is that person? And I don't think there are many individuals around who just want to kiss money goodbye like that.
Okay, Max, you were about to say something. Sorry for interrupting you.
Sorry. It was just about the front of the shirt sponsor because I did read somewhere where the club said, oh, they were comfortable with not having a sponsor because of the 100 million we made in the Club World Cup, which doesn't make any sense at all to me because obviously we made 100 million. We were fortunate enough to win the Club World Cup and get that 100 million. Otherwise, we'll be in a bigger financial mess than what we already are. But surely that's a poor excuse because 150 million or 200 million is better than just being comfortable with 100 million on prize money. So yeah, that PR nonsense doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, these guys are
Uh,
not turning away money, are they?
would
Well, they
it would
are.
it be would it be a potential scenario that they are trying to bleed it dry and then dump it? Could that be on the horizon?
Look, bleed it dry requires them to get something out of it. They're
Yep.
not getting anything out of it right now. Look, the long term plan. I never really answered your question, Mo. The long term, I believe that Bully has a vision that sport will be. There's going to be a new era of sport broadcasting, if you like.
Hmm.
I don't know what his base case is specifically, but it is clear that there's a feeling that this is going to be this part of this whole content world, and they're going to be able to monetize this future value. I've made an estimate, and just a very simple estimate, based on what they've put into the club so far. If they, well, Bowley factually borrowed £3 billion to purchase Chelsea. He's going to need to sell the club for 8.5 billion in 2033 in order to pay back these investors at the return that they've been promised, which is north of 10%. Right. So that is the play. Do we think Chelsea can be sold for 8.5 billion in 2033 when Spurs with a new stadium can't be sold for 4.5? I'm skeptical.
A club, a club's value is going to increase as its reputation increases. The way they are implementing their model, Chelsea are becoming a mid-table team. So even if they want to sell the club in 2033, they're not going to be able to sell it at a value that reflects what they actually bought. They bought a Champions League team, Champions League champions. Now they are potentially selling a mid-table club in 2033. So, uh, where is the logical where is the logical thinking behind this?
Yeah, it has to be something that we've not seen before, right? And that's the play that these guys are making. They're trying to do things that we've all never seen before. In some instances, things that have been proven to be wrong. Look, count me skeptical that this will ever happen. The key thing to remember here is that 2033 is a magical number because of the presence of Aries management in that debt structure. So Aries Management is another private equity firm that loaned Blueco 500 million pounds. And effectively, to the extent that the bank debt or the 500 million pounds that they loaned, no, there's something important about this loan to know. It's something called a paid in kind loan. So the Aries management loan does not require monthly or annual debt service payments. So interest is not being paid, principal is not being repaid. So that 500 million pounds is just there compounding and compounding until 2033. And when it matures in August of 2033 and is not repaid, Aries management will have the ability to take control of Chelsea. And that is what I mean when I say bankrupt Blueco. What I mean is Aries management ends up taking control of the club, foreclosing on the holding company. And the reason why I'm comfortable with this is because we've seen this at AC Milan, we've seen it at Inter Milan, and these are two clubs that are relevant in their leagues. So they're going in the opposite direction to what you just described there, Mo, which is that we are sinking into irrelevance. We're not able to compete. What happened in the Inter Milan example is that the private equity firm that had loaned that owner the money, when they foreclosed and took over the club, they then appointed football men to the board to manage it. So that's why Inter is doing what it needs right now to actually compete. Right? Once that owner was wiped out of the structure and he absorbed all the losses and left, the club was then able to reinvest and get itself back on a stable footing to start competing again and building that brand value that is important to ultimately being able to sell it in the future.
Um, what I'm hearing from you, Bobby, is giving me a lot of negativity, and it's not you who's giving me the negativity; it's a situation that we're in. No, it's not you.
Don't shoot the messenger, mate.
No.
That's famous.
No. It's not you. It's you're describing the situation in a very methodical manner. Um, but it's getting me to look at the position ahead or the situation ahead, and if we were seeing things moving in a direction where there is sporting success, then I could say that this might be then funneled into the financial success, and then we can move forward because then sporting success, financial success, working in tandem, moving you forward. But we are not seeing the sporting success because of a model that they're implementing. And what I've heard from you also doesn't show a lot of financial success. So we are in a really bad place on both, both fronts, the sporting front and the financial front, and that is worrying. That is really worrying. And the the front of shirt sponsor is something that is baffling, and I want to go back and touch on it again because from what I understand it, they have not gone in for a front of shirt sponsor because they are holding out for a better opportunity. But that better opportunity is all related to what we are achieving on the pitch. Because if we're in the Champions League, then we are going to demand a better sponsor or a better rate of sponsorship than if we were not in the Champions League. So, what is holding these guys back? Is it the availability of the deals? Is it they're persistent on a set figure? From what you understand, what is holding them back from going for a front of shirt sponsor, and why has it taken so long?
There's no plausible reason for it. The only thing you can do is to speculate. And
Hmm.
look, I
What's,
think,
what's your opinion? What's your opinion?
yeah, look, clean money and intelligent money usually assesses what's called association risk, a reputational risk. And the only thing I'm left to question is whether or not people have concerns about the association with what could be a very fiery ending to this experiment, right? That's the only, because there's nothing else that's logical. Sunday League, I'm sure Max knows a Sunday League team, and all of them have friend of shirt sponsors, right, Max?
Mhm.
I mean, at every level in football in the UK, um, to get a front of shirt sponsor should be nothing. So why hasn't it happened? So it really, like, I don't like speculating. I've not found anything to support a logical reason why it should not be happening.
Well, that is a very very powerful statement you just made there, Bobby. Because if they are not looking to sponsor due to risk factors, then that is going to be a position that a lot of investors in other areas of the club will also be looking at. Because if there's a risk factor, then it's going to be apparent for all investors, and this means that we are on a very what's the word here? Very tricky position right now because if boycotts start to happen, if protests start to increase, investors are going to be even more worried because that risk factor increases. So potentially, those who are protesting, those who are boycotting, have got a lot of power. Would you say?
They absolutely do, and this is what I encourage Chelsea fans to think about. Right? Look, let's destroy a couple myths here. People will say, well, clearly it has 90 billion pounds in assets under management, so they would never let Chelsea run into cash flow problems. Well, that's not how private equity firms work. Not a penny of that 90 billion pounds could ever be used on Chelsea. Egbali manages people's money. They're in discrete, separate balance sheets in separate legal entities. Okay, so for example, and Max would be familiar with this, they just had an investment called Wheel Pros that just went under. Okay, Clear Lake got out early with $1 billion in fees. The new investors who came into this structure, a bunch of pension funds apparently, they just got burned. The wheel pros just filed for bankruptcy. Okay, not a penny of that 95 billion pounds that Clearlake has in assets under management was available to save wheel pros. Same thing applies to Chelsea, right? So at the end of the day, the only commitment that investors have made to Chelsea have been disclosed in the financial statements, which is 1.7 billion, of which 1.2 billion of it was debt.
Nee,
I
you
have a
haven't.
question.
I was going to ask Lee if he wants to ask anything because he's been quiet. He's been quiet. Do you have anything you want to ask me?
Yeah, I had the question I was going to ask, and you never got back to me. It's been 50 minutes now. I've never said a word.
No,
Sorry,
that's what.
Nate.
Go on.
And it's good to talk to
That's
you
what
as well. Good to meet you. I'm always in the chat listening to you, mate.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I had a question based on the amortization at this moment. With
Yep.
squad amortization remaining a major cause for Chelsea, despite record revenue at this moment, at what point does a club's aggressive spending on long-term contract designed to spread, the money across the specific years becomes a liability that outweighs the benefit of high commercial growth for the football club?
So I think to answer your question, let's first start. Let's level set on what
Yeah.
amortization really is, right?
Mm.
And let's use a common example, right? If you're buying a car, right, you buy a car brand new, you know you're going to keep this car for 5 years. So you bought a £50,000 nice car. You're going to keep it for 5 years. What you are going to do on your personal income statement is to expense £10,000 per year because you plan to keep the car for 5 years. So your accountant is not going to just expense 50,000 a year one because you're going to keep the car for 5 years. Your accountant is going to record an expense of 10,000 each year for 5 years. That's what amortization basically means. So it doesn't represent a liability. You still went and cut a check for £50,000 to give to the dealer in year one to buy the car. Amortization is simply how you recognize it in your income statement over the life of the asset. In terms of how this applies to the players, so that's what they were doing. All they were doing was showing in their PSR accounts that they were amortizing or expensing the cost of the player over 9 years. It doesn't change how much you actually pay up front. What it can change is what you record as a profit if you sell the player within the 9 years. But again, that's a paper kind of profit or loss. At the end of the day, what was the cash you paid for the player, and then what was the cash you received for the player? And as long as you are buying high and selling low, you're losing money. And apart from Madweke and probably the kid that's now at Forest, I don't think that we've made any money on any of those players.
There you go as well.
I got one more
Right,
question.
we made someone Vega. That's fine. Exactly right.
Yeah.
I got one
So
more question.
three players. Yep, go on.
Yeah, I got one more question based on revenue versus compliance within these two. If you look at total revenue, as we're approaching an estimated 1.15 billion, yet the article that came out this year noticed that player sales remain crucial for profitability to comply with FFP. Does this imply that Chelsea Core Football, and Chelsea Football Club commercial operations are still fundamental, unable to support the current wage and the transfer structure without external market activity?
So that 200 million of losses that Mo put up on screen earlier that we're currently running at,
Right. Yeah.
that is before player transfer activity. So in other words, that's the core expense of your revenue from commercial sales, stadium receipts, player wages. It does not include amortization, but the things that you actually have to collect in cash and pay in cash every year, the net cash deficit is about 200 million every year under Blueco.
Thank you very much, Bobby, for
No worries, mate.
anxious.
Matt, you were about to tell us something, brother.
So,
Yeah,
how
mate.
much revenue? Oh,
Matt,
sorry,
Matt,
you,
Matt,
Matt.
Matt.
Okay, yeah. Great.
So on a sporting level, because ultimately what we are talking about, even though it sounds like a financial lesson, is a football team.
Sure.
What do Chelsea have to do in a realistic sporting level over the next few seasons in order to? Because you said that the issue that we're running, essentially the issue is that we're running at -5% at the moment, and we need to get it to +10%, right? So finishing in a Champions League spot, like you said, is worth about 60 mil. I think winning the Premier League gets you like 100 mil, or like 120 mil, something like that. So what do Chelsea have to do on a sporting level in the immediate future in order to make this model sustainable, or is it already too late? And is the bankrupt of Blueco 22, is that a foregone conclusion unless things ridiculously turn around like right now?
So I think Champions League, as you mentioned, is important. Front of shirt sponsor would have actually made us, I think, break even. So in other words, with the Club World Cup revenue this year, my estimate is that if they had a front of shirt sponsor, they could have reduced the cash flow deficit to about 30 million pounds.
Right.
And now that would have included the Madueke, which was a pretty good deal for us. No, the problem is that means you have to get an extra 100 million a year extra, and there's no Club World Cup every year. So
Yeah.
that's gonna be the problem, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think, look, at the end of the day, I think the play that they've made is that they're going to run at this deficit indefinitely and hope that they can flip enough players every year. So if they can flip a few players, make 200 million a year,
Yeah.
that would and it's not going to be 200 million all the time, because that 200 million was before we had Champions League. So it's going to be around 100 and 120 million. I think it's going to be the cash run rate loss every year. So I think their play is to sell a couple of players to get that done. The problem that they have is that I only just looked at Brighton's accounts for the last 5 or 6 years. They've only made a profit in 1 year, and that was, of course, thanks to us with Caicedo.
Mhm. So
So,
there's
so the
nothing.
flip model doesn't really work well.
So the model doesn't work well when it's essentially based on player trading, which is the issue that we're having at the moment. But would sporting success help turn that around? Or, like I say, is it too far gone now that even if we do challenge for the Premier League, or even crazy to think win the Premier League or the Champions League, is that gonna make a massive? Can that really help it turn around in general? Or is it, like I say, is it even if we are challenging and even if we are successful in a sporting level, it's still going to be based on player trading because of the amount of money that we're in the hole for?
The way to think about it is that a football club, Chelsea was the most successful football club for the 20 years of Rome, 19 years of Rome, right? So he won a lot of prize money, but he was still running at a loss.
Yeah.
Roman said from the beginning, if he wanted a good investment, he would not buy a football club.
Yeah. Okay.
Football clubs are not really investments. People buy them because they're fans. That's the tradition of it in the UK, right? That's even the tradition of it in the US. Do you know that professional sports teams cannot be owned by private equity clubs and private equity firms in America? A basketball team, NFL team, cannot be owned by an institution. Why is the UK allowing it? Because inherently an institution cannot be a fan. The
It's a
two
bit-
things just don't go together.
It's a bit different in America, though, isn't it? Because, for instance, the MLS, if you sign for an MLS team, you don't actually sign for the club. You sign a contract with the league itself. Do you know what I mean? So it's not possible. The club, sorry, in America in the MLS don't own the players. The league owns the players. So obviously that's maybe like a difference between. That's why we can't do that here, or we can do that here because the clubs own the assets, but in America they don't.
I'm talking about the ownership of the club. So like the
Right.
LA Dodgers cannot be owned by Clearlake. Right? Clearlake cannot own any sports team in America. But for some reason they could own one in the UK. because the two things are just incompatible. Sports clubs do not inherently make money; they're inherent loss makers, right? So that's why in the history of football, every owner sells the club in debt in the UK, right? That's been the history of the sport. Had to write off a 1.2 billion loan when he sold it, right? It's just not a cash generating asset. And that's why I question whether or not it's appropriate for a PE firm to hold. Because are they going to be able to fund these losses between now and 2033? And if they do, what would they have to sell the club at in order to pay back the investors? Because all of it is on borrowed money. Remember, the only actual cash in this structure is the 900 million put in by the three owners. Everything else is owed to institutions.
Before you jump in, Max, I want to just address this question here from Omar. Um, and it's going back to the transfers. We have a reserve. We have money to spend. Where is that money coming from?
Sorry, who's saying this? The person is saying that we have a reserve?
Yeah. So Omar says that it has been mentioned that there is a reserve. There is a budget set for this transfer window and the one in the summer. And I've seen it mentioned. I think from Nazar, Ben Jacobs. Is there, is there a reserve? And if there is money to spend, where is that money coming from? Is it linked to sales, or is there an actual reserve that we have that we can spend?
So I encourage people to keep their eyes open. Like, why would we loan Buenanote if there was a reserve? All right. Um, Chelsea is the only reserve that I'm aware of is a reserve created from selling players. Right. What that's being dressed up right now is a response to UEFA sanctions, where we have to sell before we can buy. That is the only reserve that can be created. So when we see what's happening in January and we see the players that we're looking at buying, the question that you should automatically ask yourself, well, who's being sold? And are we now selling centre backs that are reaching their prime to replace them with 20-year olds again? Because again, what we're doing is reducing the average age of the squad, right? So it's this kind of cycle that's trending downwards constantly. But to me, it all comes back from the central issue, which is there is no reserve. That reserve was funded with debt. Those two facilities are now at their limit. We don't see any news of them borrowing any more money. We only see them putting in money sufficient to pay interest. So, what reserve is there other than from player sales?
Max, you wanted to ask?
Yeah, there is. I think from the year 26-27, there's going to be a new financial system introduced into the Premier League, which is based on squad cost ratio. So I think it's reading it says clubs can spend up to 85% of their football revenue, income plus net player sales profits on player related costs like wages, fees, and agents. So does that mean we'll be in big trouble then if that's the case?
I think it's going to be the same funding model, right? Which is we're going to have to sell to buy. It's that what they're proposing for next year. My understanding of it, it's not that different to the UEFA model, which we're now trying to comply with.
The problem with that is the UEFA model is 70%, and that's not changing. So any club in the Premier League that is in Europe can still only spend 70%. So that 85% will only pertain to clubs that aren't in Europe. So Brentford will be able to spend 85% of theirs, but we won't, because if we spend over 70%, even though in the Premier League, so imagine like we buy a player and that takes us over that 70%. We'll be able to play that player in the Premier League as long as it's under the 85%, but that player won't be allowed to be registered for the European team. So it is changing, but clubs that are in Europe still can't spend more than 70% unless they, are willing to buy players that they don't want to register in Europe, for instance.
Yeah. So also, how much are we making a year? Do we know? through match day revenue, sponsorship, etc.
Yeah, there
I know
isn't.
that they want. No, sorry, because I know that they want to increase. Because I know when Todd Bowley first came in, he said there's a lot of untapped revenue in football, which he's identified. So I'm not sure what he's been working on in the last few years because nothing seems to have been materialised as
It's
yet.
probably their 3 o'clock
And
games, isn't it? And the blackout.
yeah, probably. And also, obviously, a lot of this is dependent on stadium rebuild as well. Because the reason why we are so far behind a lot of teams, that if you look at Tottenham's revenue now, even Arsenal's revenue, the amount they're getting, because they're getting an extra 20,000 fans in their ground every week, which is added up is quite a big amount. So why are we? Where are we on the stadium build as well, and obviously that's very going to be very important in our financial situation going forward.
So if you think about, and I'm glad you brought that up, um, if you think about the cost of the stadium, well, sorry, let me go back to your revenue question. I was trying to find it there. I'll send it to you afterwards. There's a schedule, um, I believe, published by Kieran Gill, where he usually shows the clubs by revenue. Um, and just to give you a sense, I think our revenue from stadium was something like 120 million, something in that region. So we're probably 30 million short of the other big clubs, the Arsenals, the Uniteds. Um, Here's the problem, Max. Spurs built their stadium. At least the estimated cost was, I think, a billion when they went into the project. It probably ended up being 1.5 billion. Clear Lake and Bowley have been funding everything with debt. So they're not actually putting in their own money, right? So all these players that they've just bought over the last 3 years, all of that has been bought at the price of 10% interest per annum. So when you hear them talk about, oh, we've made mistakes, well, those mistakes are still costing us because we're still paying interest on Mudrick, for example. Which means then that they would have to construct a new stadium completely from debt. And if their borrowing cost is about 10%, let's assume that the stadium is going to cost 1.5 billion, which is what Spurs Stadium ended up costing. 10% per annum is 150 million. That's more than we currently bring in from Stamford Bridge. And that's just interest alone, right? So when you do that math and you think that, putting up a stadium, you're already down 150 million paying back to banks in interest, you have to ask yourself, well, what's the point of getting a new stadium? And that's why Boley has said he's got 17 to 20 years to think about it, because the math simply does not work. So whenever I hear this talk about, oh, the pitch owners are holding Chelsea back and all this nonsense, well, the only thing that's holding Chelsea back is that our owners do not have the money to put in to invest in a stadium. They have to borrow all of it. And the cost of that borrowing is going to be more than the amount of revenue they collect. The math doesn't work. A stadium will never happen. Not with these owners.
So, so
I,
that's
I
like Stamford Bridge.
I mean, just do
Go on, Nick.
10% of whatever you think the new cost will be, right?
Nee, you
Say
want to
again.
ask something?
Yeah, yeah. I have a question based on UEFA and in the Premier League friction right now. Considering UEFA has previously fined Chelsea for breaching, and if you look at it, it's quite cost and rules, especially regarding the sales of the fails to fit the assets like hotels and stuff like that. How does a club current strategy as long-term player investment reconcile with UEFA's structure 70% squad cost ratio coming into effect?
Look, it gives cover for the state that we're in. Remember, UEFA's rules and the changes to PSR. These are not nefarious regulations. These are actually regulations that are designed to help clubs run themselves prudently. Okay? So, in other words, if you're going to participate in this sport, we want you to run a sustainable business, which means that your expenses need to be less than your revenue, which just generally makes sense. So the era of having these clubs just run at losses forever, they'll tolerate a certain number of losses over, a 3 year period, for example. But you can't run these losses indefinitely because they want you to run a sustainable business. We are forced to run a sustainable business because we don't have access to additional investment. We've blown out our credit lines. So we do have to run it prudently going forward. So I actually think that what UEFA is requiring of us is what we have to do anyway.
Thank you, Bobby.
All right. We have gone over the hour mark. It has been a very, very insightful stream. Bobby, we need to do this again. We need to do this again.
You
You
know where
have
to
given
find.
us a lot. Yeah, yeah. You've given us a lot of food for thought, and I've seen the chat really, really engaging with the stream today. So thank you for your time and thank you for being on the show. People in the chat, thank you all for the comments. I actually plan to go through all the comments tomorrow and just read them. I didn't get a chance to read every single comment, but I've seen some really, really good points in there, and things to look at and things to think about. So thank you to all of you who have commented, and I see some old names popping up. Some of you guys have been missing in action, so it's good to see you guys back in the chat, and I hope to see you guys in the future streams as well. Bobby, thank you for your time. Max, always a pleasure to have you on. Matt, great to have you on. Nee, thank you for your time as well, and pleasure to have you guys on. We will be back live again next Sunday night. I have a feeling we'll be posting more content during the week in pre-recorded videos as the transfer market does seem to be heating up. I'm making the content to keep you guys informed. Doesn't mean that I'm happy about these transfers. I see some of your comments. I'm I don't necessarily agree with the transfers, but I want to keep you guys in the loop. But yeah, thanks to everyone who's been here. I wish you a pleasant rest of your weekend, and hopefully have a fantastic week coming next week. Take care, stay safe, peace out.